Good evening. Alleged killer cook Erin Patterson has been grilled on why she lied to authorities, even though she knew dangerous mushrooms were in the meal she served to her relatives. The mother of two broke down in the witness box as she was accused of being two-faced.
Erin Patterson admits she lied about foraging for wild mushrooms. Today, she was grilled about why she continued to lie even after her in-laws fell seriously ill. Surely if you had loved them, you would have immediately notified the medical authorities that there was a possibility that the foraged mushrooms had ended up in the meal. Nanette Rogers put it to the accused triple murderer that she hadn't told a single person that the mushrooms may have been wild ones and instead got rid of her dehydrator. Ms. Patterson replied, correct. Today, she refuted evidence previously given by other witnesses in her case, including her estranged husband Simon, her sister-in-law Tanya, and child protection worker Katrina Cripps. The mushroom cook also quizzed on Facebook messages she'd sent her online friends, complaining about her in-laws and their son. In one, she wrote, "This family, I swear to f***ing God," and another, him. But when Dr. Rogers put to Ms. Patterson, "This expressed your true feelings about Don and Gail," Ms. Patterson replied, "I was venting and I was frustrated, but I regret writing that." The prosecution also brought up evidence previously heard by the jury about how a computer seized from Ms. Patterson's home had accessed the citizen scientist website iNaturalist, on which posts about the locations of death cap mushrooms had been made. Ms. Patterson said she couldn't remember looking up the site on the day the prosecution questioned her about, but conceded it was possible it had been her. Today's cross-examination was tense at times, with Ms. Patterson asking the prosecutor to be more precise or to repeat her question. At another point, the accused killer broke down in the dock when she was asked to explain why she invited her mother-in-law's sister to the lunch. "Heather helped me a lot when my daughter was little. I wanted to say thank you to her." The court won't sit on Monday's public holiday, with the judge again warning jurors not to discuss the case with anyone. The mushroom cook will be back in the stand on Tuesday as this marathon trial enters its 7th week. Estelle Greepink, 7 News.
My purpose here today is to give some well-earned thanks. Firstly, to Victoria Police, in particular the Homicide Squad and the team led by Detective Stephen Eppingstall. They made a professional, efficient and effective investigation into what happened at the lunch. They brought to light the truth of what happened with the death of 3 good people. We're grateful for their skills that brought this truth to light. And I'm also very grateful for the kindness and compassion they showed us, me and my family, throughout the long process that has brought us to this day. They've done a wonderful job. I'd like to extend gratitude too to the team from the Office of Public Prosecutions, led by Senior Counsel Nanette Rogers. The court processes are a little bewildering to lay people like me, and we're grateful for their expertise, their hard work and their perseverance that has secured this conviction. I'd also like to commend them for their kindness and compassion showed to us throughout this long process. They have also done a wonderful job. We're also grateful for the staff of the various public health services that played an important role in dealing with the aftermath of the lunch. There are so many services and agencies and people involved that I can't start naming names. But please, each one, accept my sincere gratitude for the part that you have played in this process. We're thankful that when things go wrong, there are good people and services and systems available to help us recover. I'd like to encourage all those involved to keep turning up and serving others. Our lives and the life of our community depends on the kindness of others. I'd like to encourage everybody to be kind to each other. Finally, I want to say thank you to the many people from across Australia and around the world who, through their prayers and messages of support, have encouraged us. I thank the people of the Leongatha and Currumbara communities in particular. Your thoughtfulness and care has been a great encouragement to us. That's all I wish to say for now. Please respect our privacy as we continue to grieve and heal. Thank you for listening. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.
I think from the moment the world found out that mushrooms had been used as a murder weapon, the intrigue was intense, and the attention has been extraordinary ever since. And this case, unfortunately, is now going to rank up there with some of Australia's most notorious and significant crime events. We're talking about the Chris Dawson teacher's pet murders just a few years ago, the Port Arthur massacre, the Link Cafe, the backpacker murders, Peter Falconia, those sorts of incidents, all the way back perhaps to the Azaria Chamberlain dingo case, and all of that driven by extreme and intensive media interest. At one point there were 5 podcasts going on this story, guys, and some of them daily, and getting healthy numbers of downloads as well, not just from in Australia but around the world. There's 2 documentaries being shot, 2 books being written. Bittersweet though for the town. They're at the centre of this now. Yes, there's an uptick in business and excitement perhaps from locals that suddenly they're the centre of the media world and the centre of global attention, but it's difficult to deal with at the same time. I mean, now the circus moves out of town and the towns are left with that stain, that memory, if you like, of the difficult moments that this case has produced. And for some of these 2 towns, it will be they become a stop on the true crime tourism trail, and it's not a comfortable position for those townships to be in.
The Victorian woman accused of preparing a deadly mushroom lunch is being held in isolation from other prisoners. Insiders say Erin Patterson's alleged crimes and high profile make her a target behind bars.
Accused triple murderer Erin Patterson has already spent 4 months behind bars. But as fears grow for the mother of 2's safety, the 49-year-old has been moved into a protection unit alongside pedophile rapist Malka Leifer.
Anybody who might be in danger from mainstream prisoners are put in these protection units.
Ms Patterson is housed in a self-contained unit at the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre in Deer Park. Inside, she's isolated but can freely walk around and has access to a kitchen.
She can cook for herself, which is interesting because they say that she can get any of the materials that you need for cooking. You can get steak, you can get vegetables, you can have salad and quite possibly mushrooms.
People may have taken particular offence at those types of alleged crimes, so I can see why they would need to protect her.
Police allege Erin Patterson prepared and served a toxic beef Wellington dish at her home in July. After an extensive homicide investigation that's made global headlines, detectives charged Patterson with the murders of her former in-laws Don and Gail Patterson and Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson.
Erin, can we just ask you a couple of questions? A brief of evidence is expected to be served on Monday. It will include documents like medical reports, CCTV seized from the tip and witness statements, including from sole survivor Ian Wilkinson.
Ms Patterson will return to court in May. Cassie Zervos, 7 News.
Good evening. Killer mushroom cook Erin Patterson has been sentenced to life behind bars for the cold and calculated murders of her relatives by serving them a lethal lunch at her Leongatha home. She'll have a chance at freedom in her early 80s after serving a minimum 33 years. We have reporters at key locations tonight. Estelle Griepink leads our coverage.
Erin Patterson took 4 steps out of the Supreme Court and 3 steps up into the prison van as the world got its last look at Australia's infamous mushroom murderer, and she got her last look of the outside world before the door was locked and Patterson's fate was secured.
Please stand.
772 days after Patterson's callous and calculated crime, justice was served in a moment broadcast across the globe.
For the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson, I sentence you to 25 years imprisonment. For the murder of Heather Wilkinson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Gail Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Don Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. All sentences are to be served concurrently.
Supreme Court Justice Christopher Beale scathing of the mother of 2 who served murder as the main course.
Your failure to exhibit any remorse pours salt into all the victims' wounds.
The hearing ran for 46 minutes and 21 seconds and was the first in Victoria to be broadcast live. The lunch's sole survivor listened to every moment inside courtroom 4 before the world listened to him.
My purpose here today is to give some well-earned thanks.
Standing alone, still mourning the loss of his wife of 44 years.
The court processes are a little bewildering to lay people like me, and we're grateful for their expertise, their hard work and their perseverance that has secured this conviction. I'd also like to commend them for their kindness and compassion showed to us throughout this long process.
Ian Wilkinson previously stunned the court, offering Patterson forgiveness and encouraging the woman who tried to kill him to confess and repent, a sentiment echoed today by Justice Beale.
That offer of forgiveness presents you with an opportunity. You would do well to embrace it in the manner he suggests.
But as her fate was decided, Patterson mostly sat with her eyes shut and hands folded, giving no reaction when her sentence was handed down. When the mother of 2 was led away by prison officers, she paused ever so briefly in front of the media, tapping her fingers along a desk where journalists were seated. For Crown Prosecutor Nanette Rogers, this is likely the biggest win of her career. But today, there was no gloating when it was all about justice for the innocent victims.
Do you think that 33 years non-parole period was appropriate?
Patterson's sole supporter inside court covered up outside.
Any reaction at all?
As her legal team left without a word.
Has Erin indicated whether she wants to appeal?
The 50-year-old will likely never know freedom again, but was spared the harshest sentence possible of life without parole. Justice Beale imposing a non-parole period of 33 years after taking into account the harsh conditions Patterson must now endure within her maximum security cell. The woman who served poisoned beef Wellingtons to her unsuspecting guests, now only receiving food through a flap in a door and barred from socialising with all but one inmate.
I infer that given the unprecedented media coverage of your case and the books, documentaries and TV series about you, which are all in the pipeline, you are likely to remain a notorious prisoner for many years to come and as such remain at significant risk from other prisoners.
The crime was heinous, Patterson becoming increasingly desperate as her elaborate web of lies unravelled around her.
You repeatedly denied foraging. You disposed of the 4 grey plates on which you served the poisoned beef Wellingtons. You falsely made out that you had fed your children leftover beef Wellingtons with the pastry and mushrooms scraped off. You feigned illness. You disposed of the dehydrator soon after you were released from hospital. You maintained the vague story about sourcing dried mushrooms at an Asian grocery and had the gall to tell police in your recorded police interview that you had been very, very helpful to the health department in its investigation of the incident.
The Pattersons' 2 children have been robbed of a mother after she robbed them of their grandparents. Her estranged husband Simon, now their sole guardian, not present at court today.
Not only did you cut short 3 lives and cause lasting damage to Ian Wilkinson's health, thereby devastating the extended Patterson and Wilkinson families, you inflicted untold suffering on your own children.
Today's sentence closes the book on a months-long investigation, a 10-week trial and a case that has captivated the world. These cues lining William Street this morning as the public tried to catch a glimpse of the killer.
I'd like to encourage everybody to be kind to each other.
But one question that may never be answered: why she did it. The prosecution not required to prove the mushroom cook's motivation for taking 3 innocent lives and attempting to take a 4th.
Only you know why you committed them. I will not be speculating about that matter.
And Estelle Griepink is at the Supreme Court this evening. Estelle, Erin Patterson can launch an appeal.
Well, Mitch, she has 28 days to do so. She can appeal her sentence, her conviction, or both. Her team would have to prove some pretty strong grounds for appeal, and if they're found valid, the case would then move from here at the Supreme Court to the Court of Appeal to be heard in front of 3 judges. Now, previously, Patterson's legal team conceded that she deserves the harshest of punishments for her crimes, but Patterson herself has maintained her innocence, and certainly today in the courtroom, she showed no remorse. The deadline for an appeal is October 6. Mitch?
Estelle Griepink at the Supreme Court, thank you. And Laura Turner joins us now from the women's prison. Laura, the killer cook is back in solitary confinement tonight.
She is, Mitch. This prison's most infamous inmate is home tonight in the Gordon unit, digesting that 33-year minimum term that she was handed at the Supreme Court earlier today. Erin Patterson may well walk free from this jail at some stage, but that is in decades to come. And even then, she will have to apply to the parole board and she'll have to be deserving to walk free of these prison walls as an 82-year-old woman. Until then, it's solitary confinement for Erin Patterson. She's only allowed to communicate with one other prisoner inside, who we know is a terrorist. Today, the final chapter in an evil tale. A global media circus and its evil ringmaster. The world's cameras clamber for a killer's final moments outside prison walls.
The Australian woman convicted of killing 3 family members with poison mushrooms will likely spend the rest of her life in prison.
Justice Christopher Beale there delivering the sentencing.
Patterson, forever the country housewife who killed and then tried to puppeteer a defence of accidental tragedy. This morning's sentence, a TikToker's sideshow.
I sentence you to 25 years imprisonment.
But Erin never scripted for the unwitting participant, the sole survivor with behind-the-scenes insight.
Firstly, to Victoria Police, in particular the homicide squad. They brought to light the truth of what happened with the death of 3 good people.
Ian Wilkinson again gracefully rising above an unrepentant villain.
We're also grateful for the staff of the various public health services that played an important role in dealing with the aftermath of the lunch.
Those with front row seats say Erin's final courtroom act was one devoid of theatre.
She sat there twiddling her thumbs, and it's surreal. It's like, has she lied that much she believes her own lies, or has she dissociated it from the whole thing?
You're looking at really a narcissistic psychopath, somebody that has no empathy, no remorse. It's all about the offender.
But in Korumburra, a community saddled by an awful cross to bear.
It's not just the 2 local families, it's a community as a whole, because they're all grieving, the people in their church, the people who know them socially up the street. So The one thing it has done is probably brought Leongatha and Caringbara closer together.
Legal experts say they've been in unprecedented demand for analysis on a case creating headlines akin to some of Australia's most infamous, like child killer Robert Farquharson and rapist and murderer Adrian Bailey.
I don't think there's been a case that I've been asked more about than this one.
And for dedicated court watchers, they held the tickets to the biggest legal show on earth.
It's kind of weird. You can feel up the whole pent-up energy before going in, just with the crowd and then watching everyone coming in. And then once it started, it was like you could hear a pin drop.
The mushroom murders will now go down in global infamy. Much to the frustration of her victims, so too will Erin Patterson.
The mystery of what was going on in her head is something I don't think we'll ever quite understand, but it's probably the thing that I think has driven the interest and the fascination in the case.
This morning's sentence drawing the curtain on Erin Patterson's horror show. Laura Turner, 7 News.
And Geordie Wright is at the scene of the crime, Patterson's Leongatha home. Geordie, this brings to an end a dark chapter for the local community.
Mitch, it's been a long 2 years of grief and uncertainty for the Caringbara community, but many say today marks the first day of healing, especially for the congregation of the local Baptist church. Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson were long-time worshippers. It's also where sole survivor Ian Wilkinson is the pastor. This morning, a small group of parishioners held a brief prayer service behind closed doors before watching the live stream. Shortly after Justice Beale handed down the life sentence to Erin Patterson, a statement was released. In part, it reads, "Justice is very important, however, it does not bring back our much-loved Heather, Don and Gail. We now only have memories and echoes of their wisdom, compassion and humour. We look forward to being reunited with them in the future. It is time for people and communities to be given the peace and space to move forward." As for Patterson's $1 million home here in Leongatha, it's currently under a court order, meaning if it's put on the market, she won't see a cent. The Supreme Court ruling any money from the sale could be given to the victims' families as compensation, Mitch.
Geordie Wright at Leongatha, thank you.
Motive in the alleged mushroom murders may never be made clear as the trial enters its final stage. Today, prosecutors had one last chance to convince the jury Erin Patterson is guilty of murder, before the defence claimed it was a tragic accident from a devoted mother.
Tragic accident or deliberate poisoning? That's what the jury will soon be asked to decide. The prosecution and defence today given a final chance to address the court. Colin Mandy urged the jury to find his client not guilty, arguing Erin Patterson had no reason to rob her own children of their loving grandparents. Without a motive, you're left guessing about the most important element of this trial, and that's intention. Mr Mandy also criticised the prosecution for not leading expert witnesses about whether it's possible for different people to have different medical outcomes after ingesting death cap mushrooms, and argued his client had helped police without hesitation when they'd inquired about the whereabouts of the lunch leftovers. But prosecutor Nanette Rogers said Ms Patterson had gone to great lengths to frustrate the investigation by giving police a dummy phone instead of her real one and dumping her dehydrator. The prosecution also accused Erin Patterson of telling multiple lies, not only after the lunch, but during her time in the witness box. Nanette Rogers telling the jury the mushroom cook had also tried to deceive them with a carefully constructed narrative. Dr Rogers reminding the jury Ms Patterson had been reluctant to take her children to hospital, saying if your children had come within cooey of the same meal, you would move mountains to get them there, telling the jury in her final attempt to convince them the mother of two is a triple murderer, saying there's no reasonable alternative explanation for the tragic deaths.
Estelle Griepink is in Morwell tonight. Estelle, Erin Patterson is a step closer to learning her fate.
Well, Karina, we're now reaching the final stages of this trial. It's expected the defence will wrap up their closing arguments tomorrow. The judge then wants to give his charge or his final directions to the jury on Monday, which would mean the jury would go out to deliberate on either Tuesday or Wednesday. But it's really anyone's guess at this stage just how long the jury will take to reach a decision. Karina?
Estelle Griepink in Morwell, thank you.
It's the lethal lunch that's captivated a nation. 3 guests dead, 1 accused killer cook, murder by mushrooms, or a tragic accident. Will Erin Patterson walk free? Be the first to know. Live rolling coverage the moment the jury decides on Melbourne's 7 News.
Accused mushroom killer Erin Patterson and her estranged husband both broke down in tears as week 1 of the lethal lunch trial wrapped up. The jury has been sent home for the weekend with strict instructions.
Returning to the witness stand for a second day, Simon Patterson told of growing tensions between his parents and his estranged wife, Erin, detailing how he tried to get a mediator, describing some of the accused killer's communication as extremely aggressive. The jury was shown text messages between the separated couple. They argued about Mr. Patterson's mother's birthday lunch that Ms. Patterson believed her in-laws hadn't invited her to. It seems that my invite tomorrow is a bit of an afterthought, so I might pass, thanks, as I don't want to go somewhere I'm not welcome. Oh, come on, that's ridiculous. What I reckon is everyone forgot to invite me to this thing, and I feel very, very upset. Mr. Patterson was also questioned about the days after the fatal mushroom meal, when his parents Don and Gail and aunt and uncle Heather and Ian had all been hospitalised after eating individual beef Wellingtons prepared by the 50-year-old mother. Her lawyer put to Mr. Patterson that he didn't pass on the seriousness of his parents' conditions, to which Mr. Patterson replied, "It intrigued me that she didn't actually ask." Among the 3 hours of evidence today, emotion. The jury shown a video of an interaction between one of the couple's children and Mr. Patterson's parents. It brought the alleged triple murderer and her estranged husband both to tears. At the end of today's evidence, the judge acknowledged the extensive media coverage the case has already received. He reminded the jury not to conduct any of their own research or speak to anyone about the trial. Mr. Patterson will return to court on Monday for a 3rd day of cross-examination. His ex-wife has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Estelle Griepink, 7 News.
Now, the interest level in this case has been so high around the country and even the globe, all eyes have been on Morwell. Court watchers have spent the past 11 weeks at the Latrobe Valley Courts. Estelle Griepink caught up with one of them.
What was it like to be in the courtroom?
It was amazing to be in the courtroom today. Yes, it was silent and electric would be how I would describe it, yes.
How long have you been coming here for?
I've been coming since week 2, so I've been here for quite a lot of the trial, yes.
What has intrigued you about this case so much?
Everything has intrigued me about this case. A family sitting down to a meal, the consequences of that meal, was it deliberate or was it accidental, all the twists and turns along the way. It's all just been very, very fascinating.
And can you tell me about the logistics of even getting a seat in the courtroom on verdict day?
We had to line up early and we didn't really lose our places, and it was just during lunch that I actually had an alert come up on my phone that the jury had reached a verdict, and I was already in the line anyway, so that was kind of lucky.
How memorable of a moment is this going to be to you?
I think it's something that I'll remember for the rest of my life, as I'm sure a lot of other people will as well. Just the historic significance of this case and the attention that it's had, not just in Australia but also around the world.
How do you think the families might be feeling now that they've finally got that guilty verdict?
I think the families will be relieved and have a sense of closure. I hope so. Yeah.
And just lastly, there's a sort of friendship that's formed amongst everyone who's been coming. Can you tell me about that?
It's been funny. We've lined up out the front a lot. I'm one of the 6 a.m. liner-uppers, and we've just struck up conversations about the case, but about other things in life as well, not just the case. And they're genuine, warm people that I've really come to know and love over the last 10, 11 weeks.
You're watching 7 News and our live rolling coverage of the verdict in the Mushroom Cook murder trial. Peter Mitchell will be here at 6 o'clock. I'll be back with you straight after this short break.
The fate of accused triple murderer Erin Patterson now lies in the hands of a jury. The Mushroom Cook's defence team has finished its closing argument, telling jurors it's ridiculous to think the mother of 2 would murder without motive.
After 8 weeks of evidence, more than 50 witnesses and 4 days of closing arguments, the jury in the Mushroom murder trial has been sent home to rest ahead of deliberations next week. Today, Erin Patterson's lawyer had his final say, telling the jury if they have any doubt in the prosecution case, they must find the mother of 2 not guilty. Rubbishing the arguments of prosecutor Nanette Rogers, Colin Mandy SC said it was ridiculous to think Erin Patterson would have committed the murders without any motive, and totally illogical to think Ms Patterson had believed her lunch guests would take her secrets to the grave. He described the Mushroom Cook's actions after the fatal lunch as entirely consistent with someone who panicked. People were blaming her, understandably, because whichever way you look at it, it was her fault. Mr Mandy also reminded the jury his client had chosen to give evidence in her own trial, exposing herself to cross-examination. He said Ms Patterson answered those questions truthfully, even when the truth was deeply embarrassing or meant she had to admit telling lies. In his final line of defence, he said the prosecution's case cannot get over the high bar of being beyond reasonable doubt.
Let's go live to Estelle Griepink in Morwell now. Estelle, this is a major milestone in this case.
Well, Mike, it's a pretty significant moment in the trial. The prosecution and the defence now have no more chances to address the jury or try and convince them that Erin Patterson is either guilty or innocent. The jury will now be focusing on deliberations which should happen sometime next week. Before then, though, the judge wants to speak with them for a couple of days, giving them his charge or his final instructions. And then when it comes to deliberations, it's really anyone's guess how long they'll take to come back with a verdict. Mike?
Estelle, thank you. Estelle Griepink.
There's been a major twist in the Mushroom murder trial, with a juror dismissed for discussing the case with family and friends. Today, the remaining 14 people elected to decide Erin Patterson's fate were told she used a celebrity cooking book to make the beef Wellingtons.
The day after the Mushroom murder trial was told a mycologist found no evidence of death caps in the beef Wellington leftovers, Victoria's chief toxicologist testified he did find death cap toxins in both the leftovers and Erin Patterson's dehydrator. The bombshell claim coming after the jury heard Ms Patterson followed a recipe in a popular Recipe Tin Eats cookbook to make the meal now at the centre of her murder trial. Ms Patterson is accused of deliberately adding death cap mushrooms to the beef Wellingtons before serving them to 4 guests at her home. A child protection worker who visited the accused killer in hospital, giving evidence Ms Patterson had said she'd wanted to cook something new and special, and that she'd used mushrooms from an Asian grocer because she'd heard they had the best flavour. Katrina Cripps also told the court Ms Patterson had described Don and Gail as the parents she hadn't had, saying they'd treated her like a daughter and she cared for and loved them, but that the relationship had changed, adding her ex-husband Simon had been isolating her from his family and at times was controlling and emotionally abusive. Before the first witness even took to the stand today, there was drama in the courtroom. The jury told one of their own had been discharged after the judge received information he'd been discussing the case with family and friends. I want to remind you of my directions that you should only discuss the case with your fellow jurors in the privacy of the jury room and not discuss it with anyone else. It's vital to the administration of justice. Estelle Greeping, 7 News.
Good evening. Accused killer cook Erin Patterson has revealed how she deliberately made herself sick in the hours after the lethal mushroom lunch. The mother of 2 broke down in the witness box, explaining how she lied about her medical issues and panicked when police started to ask questions.
Mushroom cook Erin Patterson insists she's not a killer, but does admit she's a liar. Today, telling the jury she lied to her in-laws about having cancer because she wanted their support, that she dumped the dehydrator she'd used to dry out wild mushrooms because she was scared, and misled authorities into thinking she hadn't foraged for mushrooms when she had. Ms Patterson took to the witness stand for the 3rd day today. Peak interest from the public, with queues outside the courthouse from 5 a.m. Ms Patterson is accused of murdering her in-laws Don and Gail Patterson and Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson after serving them beef Wellingtons she now accepts contained death cap mushrooms. Today, the court heard that when her estranged husband Simon asked her if she'd used her dehydrator to poison his parents, she felt scared, responsible and worried, tearfully telling the jury, "It got me thinking about all the times that I'd used the dehydrator and how I dried foraged mushrooms in it weeks earlier, and I was starting to think, what if they'd gone in the container with the Chinese mushrooms?" Ms Patterson also admitted she lied about having cancer to cover up an upcoming gastric bypass surgery. "I'm not proud of this, but I led them to believe I might be needing some treatment in the next few weeks or months. I do remember I referred to upcoming treatment because primarily in my mind, I might need help getting the kids to and from the bus or activities, and I might need to explain why I was going up to hospital for a day or 2. I was really embarrassed. I was ashamed of the fact I didn't have control over my body or what I ate, but I shouldn't have lied to them." She also claimed that after the beef Wellington lunch, she ate a large portion of orange cake made by her mother-in-law, but then felt overfull and went to the toilet to vomit it up. The jury's previously heard the 4 lunch guests were all hospitalised with multiple organ failure, while Ms Patterson was discharged from hospital after being declared clinically well. When asked how she made the beef Wellingtons, she said she tweaked a Recipe Tin Eats meal and made a duxelle from mushrooms bought from Woolworths. But after realising the mixture tasted bland, she added dried mushrooms from a container in her pantry. At the time, she believed the mushrooms came from a packet she'd bought from an Asian grocer, but now thinks there's a possibility there were foraged mushrooms in the container as well. Ms Patterson also offered explanations for other things she did after the lunch. When asked why she did a factory reset on one of her phones, she said she panicked and didn't want detectives to see photos of mushrooms and her dehydrator on it. And as for a 9-second trip she made to the toilet at a service station, she said she'd fallen ill and after going to the toilet on the side of the road was discarding rubbish from that trip in the service station bathroom. Ms Patterson was also questioned about phone data that suggests she travelled to 2 nearby towns where death cap mushrooms had been spotted and posted about online. Today she told the jury she hadn't seen those online posts or foraged in either of the towns. The accused killer this afternoon fought back tears as she described her relationship with her in-laws as really good. That relationship now under a microscope, not only in Victoria but around the world, with live blogs covering every development of this case and international reporters descending on the small town of Morwell.
How did a beef Wellington lunch lead to one of Australia's biggest murder trials?
And Estelle Grieping has the latest now from Morwell. Estelle, Erin Patterson will be back in the witness box tomorrow.
Good evening, Mitch. She will for her 4th day of evidence. Each day there have been members of the public lining up outside the courts here hoping for a seat in the courtroom and to hear what Erin Patterson has to say. Of course, by giving evidence, she's opened herself up to cross-examination. So after her defence team are finished, prosecutors will be able to ask questions of their own. Mitch?
Estelle Grieping at Morwell. Thank you.
Accused killer cook Erin Patterson has been grilled on why she fed her children leftovers from a lunch despite knowing it made her guests sick. Prosecutors also questioned why she didn't rush her kids to hospital, even asking whether she loved them.
Accused triple killer Erin Patterson says she loves her children. But today the mother of 2 was grilled about the way she cared for them in the days after the deadly mushroom meal. I suggest you told well over a dozen people that you had fed your children the same meal you had served at lunch. I was pretty clear it was the meal minus the mushrooms and pastry, so not the same, but yes. But isn't it the fact that on Sunday, July 30, you found out at least Don and Gail were unwell? Yes, I did find out about that. So why did you proceed to feed the same meal to your children when you knew or suspected that the meal made them ill? I didn't know or suspect that. You loved your children, correct? I still love them. Ms Patterson was also questioned about why her children weren't at the lunch. In her evidence, she claims her daughter wanted to go to the movies, but in the record of interview to police, her children told detectives their mother wanted to talk about adult stuff. I suggest you wanted them out of the way because of what you were serving to your guests. I assume you disagree. Ms Patterson disagreed. Between June 2021 and December 2022, 4,000 messages were recovered between Ms Patterson and her estranged husband, Simon. Dr. Rogers said, "There is not a single message about you picking wild mushrooms. Do you agree with that? I haven't done my own keyboard search on that." Dr. Rogers says the accused killer sent health authorities on a wild goose chase to find the Asian grocer Ms Patterson claims she bought the mushrooms from, alleging this story was a lie, arguing she's guilty of deliberately poisoning her 4 lunch guests. Ms Patterson's mobile phone pinged near where death cap mushrooms grow in Lock and Outram, but she denies ever being there. I suggest you travelled from Leongatha to Outram on May 22. No, I didn't. I suggest you had read Dr. Tom May's post dated May 21 of his sighting of death cap mushrooms at Nielsen Street in Outram. Disagree. I suggest you went to Nielsen Street in Outram looking for death cap mushrooms as posted by Dr. Tom May. Disagree. The prosecution alleges Ms Patterson never went foraging for non-toxic mushrooms, claiming it was a story made up for the jury.
Let's cross live to Cassie Zervos in Morwell. And Cassie, there were a number of disruptions in court today.
Well, Mike, after the lunch break, the jurors were sent out of the courtroom 3 times because Ms Patterson's legal team objected to a number of questions put to her. She has now been in the witness box for 7 days and will return tomorrow for an 8th as this marathon cross-examination continues. Mike.
Cassie, thank you.
There is a key question about Erin Patterson that remains unanswered. Why? Why did she kill her ex-husband's parents and his aunt and try to kill his uncle too? Prosecutors made clear during the trial they wouldn't be presenting a motive to the jury, ultimately believing they didn't have to. She's been described as a disturbed, sociopathic nutjob. Here's Dr. Webster again.
If you don't like the way your in-laws treat you, there are ways to deal with that that don't involve snuffing out the lives of three innocent people and attempting to take a fourth. The fact that she is capable of doing such a heinous act speaks volumes about the fact that her brain, her level of empathy, her level of self-awareness, her level of what other people think of her, it's all disturbed.
Erin Patterson has 28 days to appeal her conviction. If she doesn't, sentencing proceedings will begin in August. Often in Australia, victim impact statements from the victims' families are read to the court. The maximum penalty for murder in Victoria is life in prison.
This is 7's National News at noon with Natasha Belling.
Good afternoon. First to breaking news from the mushroom meal murder trial and the shock health claims on why Erin Patterson wanted to host the allegedly lethal lunch. Estelle Greepink is covering the hearings in Morwell in Victoria and joins us now. Estelle, good afternoon. What's the jury heard so far today?
Well, Tash, the openings are actually still going as we go to air, but so far they have been taken through the events of that day of the fatal lunch back in July 2023. They've been hearing from the prosecutor, Nanette Rogers, and what she's told them so far is that those alleged victims, Gail and Don Patterson, Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson and her husband Ian Wilkinson, had all been invited to Erin Patterson's home in Leongatha for lunch. She said she wanted to discuss a health issue and how she might tell her children. The prosecution have also told the jury that Erin Patterson wanted to invite her estranged husband Simon, and that when he declined over text message, she expressed her disappointment, saying she'd put a lot of effort into the lunch and she'd wanted it to be a special meal. Now, the jury have also been told on the day of the lunch, each guest was served an individual beef Wellington containing mushrooms, but while all four of the guests ate their servings off large grey plates, Erin Patterson ate hers off a smaller, lighter coloured plate. After the lunch was finished, she told the four guests that she had cancer, and then all four guests and Erin Patterson prayed about her diagnosis and prayed for wisdom as well as to how she may tell her family. About 12 hours after the lunch, the jury have been told each guest developed severe gastro symptoms, and by midday the next day, all had presented to hospital. They eventually all went to Melbourne hospitals, but Don, Gail and Heather passed away. Ian spent a long time in hospital, but ultimately survived. Now, Erin Patterson stands accused of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. She's maintained her innocence throughout this and has pleaded not guilty to all charges. We'll continue to hear openings from the prosecution today and then from the defence. I'll bring you the developments as they come. Tash?
Estelle, thank you so much for the update. To a key piece of the interest rates puzzle now. Just in this afternoon, the inflation figures for the month of March have been released. The trimmed mean consumer price index increased 2.4% for the quarter, 2.9% for the year. That's the lowest since December 2021 and heightens hopes of a possible interest rate cut next month. We'll have analysis of this developing news from ING Bank later this afternoon. To developing news just in as we go to air, 5 protesters are staging a standoff on the roof of a federal Labor MP's office in Melbourne. It started at 7:45 this morning. The climate and pro-Palestine activists are refusing to come down until police force them to do so. Poor communication between police, ambulance and Westfield Bondi Junction security staff are being closely examined on day 3 of a coronial inquest into the mass stabbing. One paramedic has described being forced to stay outside the centre because of fears of a second attacker. Leonie Ryan has the details.
Good afternoon. Well, we're hearing from members of New South Wales Ambulance. The first, Christopher Wilkinson, a highly decorated critical care paramedic for 42 years. He and a doctor on board received a call from the Rapid Trauma Response Coordinator at 3:43 p.m, less than 10 minutes after Joel Couchy had stabbed his first victim at Westfield Bondi Junction. Mr. Wilkinson said when they pulled up, multiple ambulance crews were already there, ready to treat the injured and dying. At this point, a mentally ill Couchy was already dead, having been shot by Inspector Amy Scott. She was the first officer to arrive after Couchy murdered Ashley Good, Yishwan Chang, Pikriya Darshia, Dawn Singleton, Jade Young and Faris Tahir. Mr. Wilkinson said the evacuation alarms blaring through the shopping centre made it hard to communicate on the radios and with other paramedics. He said they were prevented from entering the shopping centre by General Duties Police because it was a hot zone, that a threat was still present because there was confusion about whether there was a second armed offender. Mr. Wilkinson has spoken of security guard Faris Tahir and seeing him come out of the exit doors. Emergency surgery was performed at the scene, but tragically he died. Every effort was made. We did everything possible to save his life. He has told this inquest he felt inadequate, standing outside knowing people were dying inside, that the community has every expectation that paramedics will arrive and treat them in a timely manner.
Leonie, thank you. Well, Australia has been calling and calling the Oval Office for trade talks, and soon the US President will pick up the phone. Donald Trump today confirming he intends to speak with our Prime Minister as the federal government tries to strike a tariffs deal. It's a promising sign on the 100th day of his second term in the White House, with a rally held in Michigan today. Our correspondent Rob Scott was there.
Well, Donald Trump has raised hopes that a trade deal with Australia could be on the table after he gave a short, sharp response to a question as he prepared to board Marine One in Washington this morning.
The Australian Prime Minister is having an election this weekend. Will you speak to him about trade?
They are calling and I will be talking to him, yes.
The President making the comment as he made his way here to Michigan, a battleground state that helped deliver him the White House for a second time. He came here to mark his first 100 days in office, addressing a rally of die-hard MAGA supporters. The President revving up the crowd, running through what he sees as his biggest achievements over the past 100 days, saying he's helped bring down inflation, create more jobs and slash illegal border crossings.
The number of illegal border crossers released into the United States is down, listen to this please, 99.999%.
The President also spending a lot of time on past grievances, attacking the Democrats and his predecessor, Joe Biden, getting quite personal at times.
Cameras, he'd be in a bathing suit. Somebody convinced him that he looks great in a bathing suit. He's 82 years old. You don't look great. You know, at some point you have other assets, okay?
And as we've come to expect, he went after what he calls the fake news. After recent polling showed his approval ratings are plummeting. Many Americans concerned with his trade and economic policies. And a lot of those worries were on display about a block away from where the President was speaking at a large anti-Trump protest.
Hate doesn't make America great. We need to stay friends with our closest allies. This is not America. America is not hate. America's love.
The White House says the President's next 100 days will be dedicated to deals, securing international peace and trade agreements.
Rob, thank you. Well, Mr. Trump's first 100 days back in the Oval Office has been a time marked by chaos, revenge and an overturning of the rules-based world order that the US helped create at the end of World War II. To take us through the key events, we're joined from Canberra this afternoon by Professor Peter Dean from the US Studies Centre. Professor, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with Mr. Trump's tariffs. There's been some backdowns and backflips from the US leader. How do you think this will all end?
Well, I think it's par for the course for Donald Trump. His administration, his approach to things are very contradictory. He says one thing, does another thing, and he constantly changes his mind. I mean, Donald Trump as a businessman was sued thousands of times, and what he tended to do was push it as far as he could, then try and cut a deal, and no matter what that deal was declare victory. And I think we're going to see a similar approach to tariffs here.
He's already indicated with or without a deal the big tariffs on China will come down. And of course there's a 90-day pause on those blanket reciprocal tariffs that he already put in place. So there's going to be some more wheeling and dealing, there's going to be some more toing and froing and some more contradictory behaviour. But it will, I think, stabilise probably over the next 100 days. And of course you'll have to make a decision after the end of the 90-day pause.
And Professor, what about Australia? How will we carve out a deal with these tariffs? How do you think it will look for us?
Look, I think post the election, the government, whoever wins, is going to have an opportunity to sit down and negotiate with President Trump. We're in a very good position in that the US has a trade surplus with Australia, that we're a close ally of the United States. And we're seen to be pulling our way in a whole range of areas. And we've got some key issues such as critical minerals, of which the President's very interested in. Anthony Albanese has already indicated that that's something he's willing to talk to President Trump about. So it's a matter of sort of getting in the room, getting your time in front of President Trump and carving out what seems to be a reciprocal deal that would benefit both parties.
Professor, there's been a lot of controversy over the tariffs, especially with, I guess, with Australia. Our Prime Minister came out and said, you know, these acts of tariffs aren't, you know, an act of a friend. The US is incredibly important to us as also for national security. Do you think the alliance with the US has changed forever?
Look, it's hard to tell at the moment. I think the alliance, as we understand it from a defence and foreign affairs point of view, still remains pretty rock solid. There's always been differences in the past in Australia between our security relationship with the United States and our trade relationship. If you go back to the 70s, the 80s and the 90s, even into the early 2000s, there were significant disagreements between Australia and the United States on trade, on things such as aluminium and steel tariffs, for instance. It was George W. Bush, despite our close relationship around the global war on terror, who at one stage did put those tariffs on Australia as well. So I think there is a bit of a divorcing of the relationship between trade and security in many respects. But at the same time, it goes to our broader confidence in the United States under President Trump. And it goes to, as the Prime Minister said, this is not an act of a friend, and this is not an act where you have a firm basis of building a reciprocal relationship. It becomes a bit more what each party and each side can get out of the relationship and becomes more transactional.
Very interesting to see how this plays out. Professor, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is a sprint to the finish line for Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton as they scramble to spread their final pitches to every corner of our country. The Prime Minister today taking his message and his trip to the nation's capital. That's where we find our political reporter Tim Lester in the Labor electorate of Canberra. Tim, good afternoon. Mr Albanese is about half an hour away from a major speech.
Yes, Tash, indeed. There's a tradition of leaders addressing the National Press Club in the election campaign. This time, Peter Dutton has declined the invitation. Anthony Albanese, though, staying with the tradition, and we expect him to speak here in the National Press Club in Canberra. About 20 minutes from now, he should start. So that will be an important moment for him in this last week. As well, though, Labor is now fending off claims from the coalition side that it secretly wants to bring back the voice, Indigenous voice to Parliament, of course soundly beaten in a referendum in October 2023, but comments by Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong on a recent podcast have fired up the issue just before the election.
Look, I think we'll look back on it in 10 years' time and it'll be a bit like marriage equality, don't you reckon?
Penny Wong's let that cat out of the bag. Now, people will be opposed to that because they thought they sent a very clear message to the Prime Minister that they didn't want the voice.
Peter Dutton has been campaigning in Melbourne. That's the city where the coalition really does hope to pick up anything up to 6 or 7 seats and set alight its hopes of bringing back government, though the polls suggest that is unlikely. And Mr Dutton campaigning there today, of course, is guaranteed he'll visit 28 electorates in the last week of the campaign. By our count, Tash, he's only up to 11, so heaven help those who are on the Dutton side for the last few days. It'll be really hectic. On the Albanese side, though, he says he'll visit all states in the last 3 days, so there's no picnic here either.
Absolutely not. Tim Lester, thanks so much. And with his take on where both the parties stand, with just 3 sleeps out to Saturday's election, is political scientist Simon Jackman. Simon, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah. Let's start by how the campaign's going so far. Let's start with those interesting comments from the Foreign Minister Penny Wong on that podcast regarding the voice to Parliament. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
I'd be surprised if that came back into the national political debate, to be honest. I think there is tremendous unfinished business and tremendous appetite inside the Labor Party. And I think particularly the part of the Labor Party that Penny Wong comes from historically, from the left faction. But I think if you look at the trajectory of Labor over its first term, there was the voice coincided with a big fall in their primary support, something that Peter Dutton was able to ride all the way until Donald Trump upended their narrative of this election. I'd be astonished if Labor wanted to get back into those waters, at least in the same way with the referendum. There may be other ways to proceed on this critical unfinished business, both for the Labor Party and for the nation, frankly. But I doubt it's going to be at the level we saw in first-term Labor, but perhaps it's second-term Labor, perhaps with a convincing election win under their belts, and we'll see. But does that give them the sense that they've got an opportunity there, perhaps in that first 12 months of the second term, to do something, not a constitutional referendum, but something significant in that space, which, as I said, is tremendously thought of as unfinished business for the nation and for the party.
Simon, talking about Mr Trump, he's certainly dominated our federal election campaign. We saw comments there from the US president saying, yes, Australia's been calling, they've been calling, I'm going to pick up the phone at some stage. Is this a good sign, or is that not a good sign that he's willing to speak to our Prime Minister about something pretty important?
I think it's a good sign. You may say, why hasn't he done it sooner? I think from Anthony Albanese's perspective, the way Trump has intervened into our election campaign has been enormously helpful for him, and if we could leave it just like that, that would suit Anthony Albanese just fine. If, on the other hand, there was a deal to announce in the dying 48 hours of this election campaign, that would be great too. But I think for many politicians around the world, keeping Donald Trump at arm's length, right, is perhaps the best strategy in the short term. We see the Canadian election where the Liberals have gone from being in diabolical political trouble over there, running essentially against Donald Trump, brought them back to power. Now they'll fall just short of a majority, but boy, oh boy, they were in all sorts of trouble only 6 weeks ago, only 8 weeks ago. And I think for a lot of, if you're an incumbent around the world right now, Donald Trump throwing barbs at you from afar or making the world an uncertain place is great news for incumbents. It changed the narrative of this election campaign to being Labor's incompetence with respect to the economy. That was a great attack line that Peter Dutton had. It got taken away from him when the conversation flipped and became who is best placed to help Australia weather the storms that Donald Trump is helping bring onto the global stage. And that's, I think, from a purely political point of view, that's how you want Donald Trump to be intervening as a threat, and you are the solution to that in the short term. Now, if you can announce something that eases that, that would be great too. I don't expect that in the last 48 hours.
Someone talking about incumbency, talking about turnarounds, is there anything that Peter Dutton and the coalition can do to win Saturday's election? Because all the polls, and we know they sometimes can be wrong, point to a Labor victory.
In many key electorates, about a third of the electorate has already voted. Right, there's so much early voting, so much postal voting. This thing is kind of over, unless there was something tremendous blew up in the dying stages here. I don't see a road to Peter Dutton becoming the next Prime Minister of Australia. All signs are that'll be Anthony Albanese who will remain Prime Minister. I think the only realistic question, if the polls were even halfway right, is majority government for Labor or minority government. I think that's what we're talking about, as I'll be spending a lot of time in this room on Saturday night answering that question.
What plays out. We appreciate your analysis again, Simon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, members of Australia's Vietnamese community and Vietnam War veterans are gathering around the country this lunchtime to commemorate the 50th anniversary of our most divisive war. Nick McCallum has more from Melbourne.
For the Vietnamese community, many of them South Vietnam Army veterans and their families, and the Australian Vietnam War veterans, it's a day of mourning and pain. The 50th anniversary of the fall of what was then Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, a day they call Black April.
I know that there are a lot of people who are experiencing a lot of despair and grief today, and that's because we know that we had to leave our cherished homeland. And on the other side of things, here we are in Australia on a glorious day.
60,000 Australian troops fought alongside the South Vietnamese and Americans against the North Vietnamese communists for 10 years. 523 Australians were killed. The most divisive war in Australian and US history, but veterans find this healing.
I think war is never a good thing. The thing we have learned from that is that it isn't a good thing. In terms of who we left behind, you don't forget.
But in Vietnam itself, already a day of triumph and celebration has begun. A stark contrast to the sombre mood here.
A woman who cooked that lunch suspected of containing poisonous mushrooms has given police her account of what happened before and after the fatal meal. Erin Patterson, the former daughter-in-law of two of the people who died, said she had absolutely no reason to hurt these people whom I loved. She also detailed where she bought the mushrooms and why she dumped a food dehydrator. Dr. Xanthi Mallet is a criminologist with the University of Newcastle. Good morning to you. Tell us, what did you find most interesting about this new statement?
Probably the most interesting piece of information that came from this statement was that Erin claims that she also ate the meal and received symptoms of food poisoning and did in fact attend a hospital. So I think the police will be looking at that very closely because that puts a potentially different light on this.
Yeah, we hadn't heard that she'd gone to hospital or got any medical treatment before, had we?
No, that was totally news to me yesterday when I read the statements coming out. So I did think that that was interesting. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see when a full investigation is done exactly what police determine, happened during that incident and what the cause of her symptoms were.
Xanthi, I noticed she also says she bought button mushrooms from a supermarket and dried mushrooms at an Asian grocery store, although she can't remember which store that was. If that's true, should we have had a recall?
Well, it's certainly very interesting, isn't it? So the police will be looking at that very carefully. Unfortunately, she hasn't been able to identify which supermarket. The police will need to know which supermarket that was. And that's exactly what I thought. If these mushrooms are potentially in other people's homes, the police certainly need to know that before somebody else is poisoned. However, I'm not aware of any other reports of anyone else falling sick as a result of mushroom poisoning in the last few months.
She also admitted lying to police about when she dumped the food dehydrator.
Yes, so she's now saying that at the hospital, her ex-husband made a comment about the dehydrator, and that made her panic in essence. So she told the police she dumped it months ahead of time, but in fact had dumped it much more recently. So she did admit that to police in her statement yesterday.
OK, a lot more to come. Thank you, Dr. Xanthi Mallet.
Thanks, Nat.